So glad you are back with us on Conquering Retirement. Brad Johansson with Northern Alliance Financial, CEO Lance Gilman and Blake King. Gentlemen, nice to be back with you. Everything good over the holidays for you?
Awesome.
Yeah?
Always great to be back in the studio with you, Brad.
Nice to be back with you guys. We talk about moving forward a lot on this program. Today we're going to move forward on a lot. Talking about the great wealth transfer of certainly approaching probably $90 trillion now. And you say, I don't understand. Well, for a lot of this education to help you understand. Let's try to understand the great wealth transfer, Lance. Give me the concept behind that as all of the boomers are starting to age out right now.
Right. So there's this huge dynamic that's occurring. And you mentioned $90 trillion. We don't even really think about what that means. I mean, people kind of get a concept. You say a million. It's like $1 million. And that used to be a number that was a big number. But then you think about it, Brad. So a billion is 1,000 million. Okay. So now that starts to become like almost untangible. It's like, what? Mm-hmm. And a trillion is 1,000 billion. It's like, what? But that's the amount that we're talking. This is like the huge gorilla in the room that is actually going to be transferred over the next 10 years or so.
Well, give me an idea, Blake, what that transfer actually means. This is what this generation has now accumulated?
Yeah, absolutely. So the great wealth transfer is essentially the boomers, right, leading into retirement. And unfortunately, the Gen X and Millennials are going to be the inheritors of that $84 trillion or almost $90 trillion. And so when we have that massive shift in monies from one party to the next, there's going to be a lot of implications associated to it, especially if the money isn't transferred intentionally or there hasn't been proper planning around it.
So how do we figure out it transferred properly? What do we need to set the table on for people understanding, oh, okay, I need to watch out for what's coming?
Yeah, so let's say it's gorilla in the room, right? As like what Blake was just saying, it could be unfortunate. You know, it's unfortunately the Gen Xers and the Millennials are going to inherit this, but it also could be very fortunate that they're inheriting this money if there's proper planning done. But that's the key, right? Is a failure to plan is a plan to fail. Well, we got to have a game plan here.
Okay.
Because the government's going to be standing there with its hand out and trying to take as much of that transfer as possible away from the next generations that should rightfully inherit it if they plan.
So tax implications is what we're dealing with here?
Yeah, major tax implications and estate planning, right? One of the biggest things that we encourage people to do consistently is look at their beneficiaries. Because if there isn't a beneficiary listed on an account that can transfer through beneficiary designation, guess what? It's going to go through probate, right? And when it gets locked up in probate, there's also going to be an additional fees or probate costs or even death taxes.
So have families, as you say, failed to prepare for a wealth transfer? And if so, I guess what you're saying is most people coming in need to be prepared for this astronomical number of $90 trillion. Now, obviously, there's so many people within the boomer generation that are creating this huge $90 trillion. How do we do this individually? And what are you doing for folks on this great wealth transfer?
Well, I think the big thing that I see is that there is a lack sometimes of communication. One of those things that they always tell you when you're talking to people, you know, especially family, you're not supposed to talk about money or politics or religion. Well, there's $90 trillion that's on the table here. And the government would just as soon us not be talking about this and having a game plan. Because if we don't talk about it, they're going to get as much money as they possibly can. But if we do talk about it and we have a plan that's in place, not only for taxation and estate planning and beneficiaries and other things, as Blake was just saying, well, if you don't have a plan, then everything is going to be probated. Well, then that's going to the state, and that's going to the courts. And if there's no estate plan, then they're going to have to assign an executor to the estate. You have to kind of petition the probate court. And then there's all the family dynamics that potentially are going to be involved as well. So the big key, Brad, that I would say is we have to start the dialogue.
Okay.
Sooner versus later. Because if we start the dialogue, then, especially with the boomer generation, because they came up in a generation where you didn't really talk about these things. And you don't talk about these things, and then all of a sudden, guess what? You're gone. And now you have to let the next generation kind of figure it out. And that's where problems happen.
This becomes an estate planning thing for a lot of people. And if you hit that topic with many, they say, well, I don't have an estate. I don't really have a whole lot. You know, I have my house. I got a little bit of land. Why would I need to do this type of planning? Is this something for everyone? No matter where you sit right now, in understanding what you have and where you want it to go, Blake?
Absolutely. I think it is for everyone. And one of the tools that we actually have is the NAF Legacy Quiz. And that NAF Legacy Quiz can actually identify how prepared are you for that great wealth transfer. Because without a clear plan in place, then things could get locked up in probate, or things could be misunfortunate, and someone may be inheriting money that you don't want them to inherit it, right? And so with this legacy quiz that we have available, it'll actually just give you just a general baseline, and it'll be able to identify, hey, are there some holes in how you want wealth to be transferred? Or is there any ways that we can actually protect a house that's down in Florida? What are these different tools that we could actually implement to ensure that the money stays in the family and not as much money is going to the IRS?
And you say this is for everyone, Lance, that maybe there's an understanding. I think for a lot of you folks, naflegacyquiz.com, you can go to the website, you can scan the QR code that's on your screen right now. It will take you to a little quiz. It's more a preparatory understanding of maybe there's some questions here I hadn't even thought of to get ready for.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is it starts that dialogue, right? It starts you thinking about these things, the things that are important to you, but then you know where you stand in terms of your planning. But what about your parents' generation, right? So then it starts, well, Dad, Mom, have you actually done any of this stuff? I mean, it makes you start to think about it, but it also makes you think about your parents too. Well, have they done? What about the house? Has anything been done? Have we done any legal work? Are your beneficiaries all set up? Is there a way to protect, as Blake said, the camp or the house that's in Florida? If there's not a dialogue, the likelihood that all of that is just going to miraculously fall into place is pretty marginal. So we've got to start that process, and that legacy quiz is a good way to start.
So if this is a place that you need to start, naflegacyquiz.com, scan the QR code to get an understanding of what you need to know and maybe some things that you hadn't even thought of. And then once you get to this spot, then you probably say, I'd like some help. You'd want to make the call to 877-241-7430 so that we can put together a complimentary written financial plan that is just for you. Some questions have now arisen for you to say, you know, I probably need some answers to these. Can you help me? It's what we do at Northern Alliance Financial. 877-241-7430 for a complimentary written financial plan that maybe helps you with your legacy. We'll be right back.
You've spent a lifetime building your wealth, but without an estate plan, the future of your assets may be uncertain. It's not just about having a will, it's about protecting what you've built and making sure it ends up in the right hands with minimal stress for your loved ones. Our estate planning readiness quiz helps you quickly assess whether you're prepared for a legacy standpoint. It's fast, free, and it highlights where you may need to take action. Scan the QR code on the screen or visit naflegacyquiz.com to take the quiz today.
Glad you're with us on Conquering Retirement. Brad Johansson with Lance Gilman, Blake King, Northern Alliance Financial. And we're talking a little bit about the great wealth transfer And it is great as we reach upwards of $90 trillion moving into this. We talked earlier about tax implications on something like this. Do we begin with IRAs? Do we begin with the 401ks? How do you start talking about where I need to know and what I need to dive into first?
I think we begin with all of it. We need to know what the structure of the inheritance is going to be. And that's part of the reason that it is so critical to understand and to start the dialogue now. Because what is the structure of the estate? What kind of real estate are we dealing with? Is it protected? Is it in a trust? Are we dealing with qualified pre-tax accounts? Are we dealing with non-tax or non-qualified accounts like investment accounts? And how is that all going to be transferred? Who is it going to? When is it going to happen? Because maybe if we're dealing with a qualified account, let's say we've got, I don't know, $500,000 in a qualified pre-tax account that came from an old 401k. Well, maybe if we've got enough time in the planning process, we start to do some conversions, taking money from that qualified chassis and converting it into a Roth account, which will never again be taxed for the next generation. But the point is that we've got to start knowing what the entire inheritance looks like. You start where you start. It's like climbing a mountain. You don't just drop somebody there. You got to start. You got to start that first step, and we got to open this box up and see what we're dealing with. In order to do that, we have to start the dialogue.
Okay. So Secure Act 2.0 is kind of changed things as far as inheritance goes. Fill me in on that, Blake.
Yeah, so what happened in the Secure Act 2.0 is they stopped the ability to take your inherited IRA to be stretched out over your life expectancy.
Yeah.
What they did is they shortened that to 10 years. So if you are a non-spousal individual inheriting in an IRA, then you actually have to cash out that IRA within 10 years in order to be compliant with the IRS. But here's where it actually becomes tricky. The people inheriting these monies are going to be your Gen Xers or your millennials, right? And these Gen Xers, they're in their highest working compensated years in their entire career, right? They're nearing retirement. They're making the most they've ever made in their entire life. Well, guess what? Now you inherit this inherited IRA. And because you have to start taking money out, maybe this jumps you from the 24% tax bracket to the 32% tax bracket, right? And so we actually need to be cognizant of where your inheritors are actually in their financial lives as well, and have an actual game plan of like, hey, do you want to pass on a large tax burden to your children, or do you want to start detaxing your portfolio so that your inheritors can actually live a lot more fruitful life with your inherited dollars and give less to the IRS?
Okay. You put together the legacy quiz. Now I'm going to switch you up, folks. If we're talking about taxes, this may give you a better understanding of where you are as well. It is naftaxtest.com. This is within the qualified money that you have, that you're now qualified to pay more taxes. But you may not have an understanding of what Uncle Sam wants from you. Now, as you take it out, when you take out RMDs, when you move the inheritance down, and the level of continuing taxation, or maybe some of the options that you have strategy-wise. Why is this calculator so important, Lance, on people having a better understanding of maybe I'm not going to pay less taxes in my retirement?
Right. Well, exactly. And these calculators that we have that are available to us and the quizzes, they just tell us the story, and the math is the math. So if you inherit this and it's all qualified, well, guess what? You just bumped up a tax bracket. If you don't do anything, but if you know you have to take out, let's say, $10,000 per year now because you inherited this, it's a problem, but it's not an insurmountable problem, Brad. We can deal with that. So maybe we haven't maxed out our 401k yet. Maybe in our 401k, we're only putting in, let's say, 10, 15,000 per year. Well, we can go all the way up to 30,000. So now we just inherited 10,000, but if we now structure our contributions to our 401k to offset that, that problem is gone. You see, it's the power of the plan, Brad.
Mm-hmm. Putting together that plan and obviously changing what you do. Are there movements now in the contribution world of saying, maybe I should not be contributing the same amount that I did to a 401k plan? And are there strategies now to get ahead of that as we talk about building a plan, figuring out how we start to work? While I'm still working, are there strategies still with how I contribute and whether or not Roth starts to play within that? Because I know within this calculator, the Roth is part of the big strategies to say, maybe as I have time, and my runway is a little bit longer now while I'm still thinking about that and getting out ahead of my retirement, there are strategies that I can use and that you have helped them put together.
There are strategies that you can use. Ultimately, what we're going to identify is what's most important to you first, right? And if taxation is a very big thing that you are concerned about, we're going to be exploring all the different tax options that you have available through your current employer plans. Most 401ks do offer a Roth piece now, as that was implemented through the Secure Act 2.0. We just got notification that simple IRAs are now offering Roth options. Even though that they were passed in the Secure Act 2.0, which was back in 2022, it took a long time for these custodians to actually get up to date and say, okay, yeah, now we have the infrastructure to where we can do Roth simple IRA contributions. And so if you're 5, 10, 15, I would say probably 10 to 15 years outside of retirement and you have no Roth monies, it's time to start getting that additional bucket into the equation. And why that's important is because you have to start that 5-year clock rule, right? And
well, fill us in on that, because there's some who are saying, okay, I didn't know I had this option. I got a five-year clock rule. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so the 5-year clock rule, the way that a Roth was designed is any money that you put into a Roth IRA, you can immediately have access to it. But it starts a 5-year clock. So the Roth needs to be in place for at least 5 years before you can start accessing the growth without penalty. Keep in mind, you also need to be over the age of 59 and a half. So if you can get that 5-year clock starting at 55 and say you want to retire by 60 or 62, that Roth money is fair game. No taxes, no penalties, nothing like that. So you want to start prior to retirement so that you can start that 5-year clock.
Lance, tell me about the change in this, and it's probably been within the 5, maybe 10 years, but much more universal now in the last 5 years of dealing with Roth. Have you used this strategy with more and more clients because the knowledge is now there and people say, I didn't realize I had this option? Now you guys can work this plan kind of universally with a lot of people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And more people are understanding the Roth because it's becoming more commonplace and people are talking about it more. But the difference is that we go back to the law changes in the Secure Act Part 2. Remember that the Secure Act Part 2 basically said, okay, we're eliminating the stretch IRA. Stretch IRA is where you had a qualified plan, let's say, and then you inherited that as the recipient, non-spouse. You could stretch that over the course of your life. But before the Secure Act Part 2. After Secure Act Part 2, they said, no. Government said, we don't want this stretch plan. We want all of those funds to be able to be pulled out of there within 10 years so that what? We can get our hands on it and tax it.
Yep.
But a Roth is different, right? So once it's in the Roth chassis, the rules still apply. The 10 years still applies. However, once it's in the Roth, it's never taxed again, even to the recipient. And so, yes, absolutely, clients that we have tried to take advantage of that using some of these tax calculators and other things to make sure that we're not bumping them into another tax bracket, marginal tax rate, doing what we can. Remember, the other piece of this is the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. That was supposed to sunset in December of 2025.
Right.
The current administration just said, we're blowing that out for as long as possible. So we had a lot of clients trying to take advantage of the conversions during the time that we thought the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was going to sunset in December of 2025, a lot of clients were taking what they could every single year, taking a slice of this qualified pre-tax bucket and getting it into the Roth. Now we've got a little bit more timeline until what? Till they change the law again.
Yeah, yep.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, we've got a window of opportunity to really look at this for our clients and get some money over into that tax never bucket, that Roth. And this is why it's important to be talking, not only have a plan yourself, your own plan, but talking to your parents and saying, okay, let's talk about this transfer. What's going to happen? Let's not have this be a surprise. Let's not go into this without a game plan.
Yeah.
Because maybe we can do some Roth conversions even within the parents, within the boomer generation before the money's transferred. Then the money is transferred non-taxed.
Tax Cuts and
Powerful.
Jobs Act, as it extends, people don't feel like they're in a great tax situation. We never feel like we're in a great tax situation. And yet now is probably the time. And if the window is open for several more years, why is that so beneficial for people right now with the way tax rates are, at least in the highest marginal rates?
Well, we're actually, historically speaking, in a very low tax bracket environment. I know it doesn't feel that way,
Yeah.
which is completely fine, but we are historically. I think it was dating back into the 1940s. The highest tax bracket was 96%, right?
Yeah.
96%. Right now, the top is 38, right? So we are in record low tax brackets. And so we need to, it's a phrase that I commonly use with clients. We need to get good while the getting's good, right? We need to take advantage of the opportunity at hand because we don't know if this opportunity will ever come across our desk again, right? And so we need to take advantage of the opportunity we have available and not squander it. And we need to, because the people that have the most successful retirement are the ones that have the traditional buckets, the Roth buckets, the non-qualified buckets. Those are the individuals that can live the most tax-conscious life in retirement. And if you just have pre-tax money, that's it. That's your story. That's what it is. We're going to make do with what you have. But for the ones that have all different types of tax types of buckets, they're the ones who actually can live the most fruitful in retirement.
So you play with the rules that you have now. And the rules are as good as they've been in a very long time. NAFTaxTest.com. Scan the QR code. What is your situation? And is it beneficial for you to come in? That's when you make the call to 877-241-7430 to put together a complimentary written financial plan. If the great wealth transfer, you can either transfer it to Uncle Sam or you can transfer it tax-free. I think you'd have the choice very easily made for you if you understand what's out in front of it. 877-241-7430. Let's put together a plan for you now. Be right back.
The work never seems to end until the day it finally does. After nearly a lifetime on the job, you should be rewarded for all the time you spent working. Whether that's crossing off items on your bucket list, learning a new passion, or rekindling the love of an old one. After all, life isn't over when you stop working. It's the start of an all-new chapter, the one where you're the writer and you get to choose how your story will go. A way to achieve that is by having a clear financial plan to sustain your golden years. The biggest fear most retirees have is if they'll have enough money to maintain the lifestyle they've always enjoyed. Having a plan to help protect you against the curveballs life often throws will help to maintain your lifestyle. Call today to get your free written financial plan so you may live every day to the fullest and enjoy the retirement of your dreams.
Glad you're with us on Conquering Retirement. Brad Johansson with Lance and Blake as we're talking about this great wealth transfer. You kind of hammer on this, Lance, that you can't do any of this without a written financial plan. And people go, oh, okay, I have something. What's the difference about walking into your office? What does it look like to come in and talk about putting together a written financial plan?
It's very, very critical. In the military, we went through land navigation. The critical thing in land navigation is to know where you are and where you want to go. And then you can get an azimuth to say, okay, this is how we're going to get there. But we need to know where you're at. And so that's where the power of this communication comes in. The first meeting, when somebody comes into the office, is all about listening to you, the client. What does a good, successful retirement plan look like to you? And it's different for everybody. That's what makes this job so exciting, Brad. But we have to start that dialogue. We have to start engaging, and then we can build out the personal financial plan. But we've got to know where you're at. We've got to know where the starting point is and what your goals and what the end point looks like to success in order to build this plan out.
So as you put together a great wealth transfer, is it important to have multiple people within this meeting? Husband, wife? Do you actually include beneficiaries within these discussions? Does it make it helpful to put most of these people together in the same room to talk about a plan moving forward as we talk about a great wealth transfer?
The more involved the family is in the process, the more you'll be able to identify what the appropriate process is, right? There are many instances where I do meet with clients and their adult grown children, right? And it's because we're talking about these very important things. What are the intentions of the parents, and how is this going to affect their retirement picture? And then how is that money going to be transferred, and in what tax status is it going to be transferred, and how will that play an effect on their financial lives as they're inheriting these assets, right? And so as we go through the first meeting, it's pretty intentional. The first set of questions outside of what do you want retirement to look like is your name, date of birth, address, and then the very next question in our process is, do you have an estate plan set up? Yeah. Do you have a will? Do you have a financial power of attorney? Mm-hmm. Do you have a healthcare power of attorney? That's how important these things are. And for people who have never even thought about this, we're at least bringing it to light to where they're like, oh, I do have a will, but I never really thought about a financial plan or a financial power of attorney or a healthcare power of attorney. So just having that dialogue, starting the communication with us so that you know everything that's important for you and your legacy.
It's time for you to make the call, to get some help, to put the plan together. 877-241-7430. It's your complimentary written financial plan. Time's important. Do it now. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you in the office and right back here next time on Conquering Retirement.